in the 40s by Hubble and Wiesel, which also understood that in our biological vision system, we have a set of simple cells and they consolidate into complex cells, which is in a way similar to the convolution function. So, so we move from the input image to feature maps. What basically this is doing, it is detecting images, detecting features like edges or colors, and by training multiple layers, we can create the system. Okay, so this is the convolution neural network, CNN, and this has been by far the popular component, or the mainly since the AlexNet breakthrough, but definitely it was not. It is a method which was known much earlier, and we'll go into that. Okay, so a little bit about the history of artificial neural networks for vision, or in general for vision, and AI in general. So Alan Turing in the 50s was considered the father of computer science, but also of artificial intelligence. He already envisioned the capability of a computer or technology to have some intelligence, and everyone or many of us know the Turing test, which is covered in a very important paper. So, but even prior to Alan Turing, already in the early 40s, Pitt and McCulloch, I think it's pronounced, they developed some kind of a threshold logic unit, and they already showed they can theoretically mimic the way neurons work, and they probably have been the first to think of this idea. Already in the mid-50s, Alan Newell described a computer program that can learn to recognize letters. So I think it was a theoretical work, but he described how that can be done. And then in the 50s, Frank Rosenblatt developed an electronic device, actually, which he called the perceptron. And I don't think he implemented it electronically, but he's been able to simulate it on a computer system and to show that it can perform some kind of learning. So this was the very early days. And actually in the 60s, Minsky and Sumer, they wrote, I think it was a paper or chapter in their book, and they actually killed the Rosenblatt perceptron. They kind of proved that it is not scalable, it is incapable of learning even a simple exclusive XOR function, which is actually something that today we know it's obvious, but there are ways to work around it with nonlinearity and deep layers and so on. But the impact of their work was so strong that after their work, the field entered what is known as the dark age or the AI winter. For almost 15 years, there was very little happening in the field of neural networks. Actually, till the 80s, where Hinton, the guy who is part of the AlexNet work, or supervised AlexNet work, introduced the capability of backpropagation, the way you do training through hidden layers and with the ability to learn actually any function. So actually just by Minsky paper, I think maybe we lost something like 10 to 15 years of research in this field. And then in the 90s, Feigenbaum and Rand Reddy won the Turing Award, and they demonstrated practical importance and the impact of AI. And also mid-90s, Yan LeCun at Bell Labs, he developed the LENet5, a convolution-based handwriting recognition. This is a very important milestone. Alex Krichensky in interviews keeps saying that much of his motivation was by reading this paper. But however, mostly due to lack of computing strength, artificial neural networks didn't scale for many years since then, till 2005, 2006. And actually, approach that was very popular through those years was for doing some kind of learning or prediction was SVM, support vector machine, which is essentially a statistical, a way to predict, to make predictions based on statistics. And that was the main focus in AI. That was, the method of choice in AI research. And only in 2006, Hinton again promoted deep learning models and based on Boltzmann machine theories, and then in 2012, actually, some people refer to it as the scalability breakthrough year, which is marked by AlexNet winning what is known as the ILSVRC, Large Scale Visual Recognition Challenge, and AlexNet was the paper describing their work. So early in our century, there was work in the field, but it took almost 10 years to make it really scalable, and since then it is booming. Okay, more specifically about the history of convolutional neural networks for computer vision. So I mentioned Hubble and WISL, which were basically neuroscientists, and they observed how neurons respond in the brain to images by the complex cells. And then in the 80s, Fukushima, inspired by the work, published the original convolution architecture. And then, as I mentioned, Yang LeCun came with a practical implementation, recognizing letter. This is a very known architecture, the LE5Net. Okay, now I'm going to spend one slide on the GPU because this is very important with regards to the AlexNet breakthrough. So GPU in a nutshell is basically, we all know CPUs, the processors on computers, but GPU originally developed for gaming and graphics is composed of many cores, and each core is running many threads, and basically all of them are doing the same task, only on different data, what is known as a single instruction, multiple data. And this is very useful for graphics, as since you perform the same function on all pixels in the image. So this works very well. So instead of having one or very few multiple cores of very smart and strong cores, GPUs are essentially about many very simple cores that can perform simple tasks on, but at the same time, in parallel on pixels. And this is a very efficient manner. And as I mentioned, it is very useful for graphics and for gaming applications, but eventually it was found to be also very useful for deep learning. because in a way, we are handling pixels or data points in feature maps, and all of them are going through the same process. So GPU was a major enabler for the industry, and this strongly relates to the AlexNet work. Okay, so starting 2010, this competition was established. It's called the ImageNet Large Visual Recognition Contest, and basically, I think I'm missing, yeah. It provides a data sets of, the data sets has more than 1 million of trained images that can be trained. Actually, in the challenge, only a subset of it is used. It provides about 100,000 test images and 50,000 validation images to validate that your solution is correct. And the challenge is essentially very simple. Everyone who is competing needs to develop his program, and there are 2 criteria. One is the top 1 and one is the top 5. So if you're top 1, if you get a hit on your top 1, if you guess that you grade your labels, you say, the highest probability that this is a dog, next probability is a cat, and so on. So if you guess the top 1, that's one criteria, and if your prediction is in the top 5, that's also considered very good, because many of the images have ambiguity and so on. So that's another criteria, and AlexNet actually won the competition in 2012 big times. They managed to achieve a 15.3 error percent compared to the second place, which was 26%. The less is better, of course. We're talking about the error rate. And their model was strongly based on convolution and other attributes I'll go through. It has 61 million parameters and 24 million multiply accumulate operations per classification. Okay, so the authors, I mentioned Hinton. He won the Nobel Prize in 2018. Alex Krizhevsky, who the net is named after him, AlexNet. He a very interesting person. He very hard worker. A strong combination of a researcher and an engineer, and he probably put much of the effort of coding the solution. After winning the reward, he joined Google with the startup that partnered with Hinton, and a few years later he left Google in 2017. Went through some startups, but in recent years there isn't much information about him. He kind of lost interest, and I'm not even sure. There's no evidence he ever, at least per searching, no evidence that he ever accomplished his PhD under Hinton. I'm not sure about that, but I couldn't find any evidence of that. He did create at some point 2 data sets which are very popular, the CIFAR10 and CIFAR100 data sets. So that's Alex. The third guy, that's also interesting, something I realized only when I was searched for this presentation. Ilya Sutskever. I just realized that he grew up in Jerusalem, and he attended the Open University for 2 years in Israel, while he was at the age of 14, probably, as a high school student. However, at the age of 16, he moved with his family to Canada and moved to the University of Toronto and joined the Hinton's research team and a company that was later acquired by Google. In his years in Google, he worked on very interesting or known stuff as the Google Brain, the AlphaGo challenge, which they managed to win the Go game, and the TensorFlow, which is a very useful platform for developing AI application. Since 2015, he co-founded and is now the chief scientist of OpenAI, and they developed ChatGPT, which all of us are, or many of us are very excited about playing with it, and I'll get to it in one of my last slides. That's interesting. There's also an interesting interview with him in Ynet, in the Israeli Idiot website, and that's an interesting reading. Okay, so back to the AlexNet paper. So there are a few key things that they've emphasized and made them win this challenge, but eventually there is nothing in this paper that wasn't known prior to the paper. That's very interesting, and they just managed to put things together, to put technology and computer power into an architecture that works very well, and they realized few key methods that made it happen. So maybe the strongest contribution is that they found out that GPUs, or they realized the strengths of GPUs in executing AI in general and specifically convolution layers. However, they were not the first one to use GPUs for convolution layers, and even in the paper, they admit that the architecture is very similar to a CNN employed, I think it was presented a year before or 2 years before, by some other work in the competition, which also used GPUs, but probably not in a very successful manner. And they figured out how to use GPUs very efficiently. And the method they suggested is GPUs, today GPUs are very strong, and but 10 years ago, they're already quite strong. But the main problem or the main bottleneck was the memory interface. And they figured out how to create 2 parallel channels and communicate between the 2 GPUs in between while doing a single classification. What everyone was doing was distributing the training sets. When you're training thousands of images, you can parallelize. You can run 500, half of it on one GPU and the other half on the other GPU, but that's not good enough. What they did, within the same model, within the same classification, they used 2 GPUs in parallel, and this contributed significantly to the result. So this was something they suggested. To some extent, it used till today, though the GPUs are so strong today, so this is kind of not that much needed anymore. And they found a way to trade the model size with the computation strengths of the GPU. So the memory was less of a bottleneck. They applied an activation function. I don't think we have time to go into that, which was much more simple. It's called the ReLU, and opposed to a sigmoid, which is different, but it's exponential function, which is much more compute demanding. The ReLU was it's actually a very simple function. Actually, the ReLU is also known a long time before, but I think Hinton found that it can be very useful, and loss in accuracy of the solution is insignificant. And they also found out and emphasized it across the paper that the importance of depth of layers, of hidden layers. Till then, people are doing 2, 3, 4, 5 hidden layers, and they actually figured out that it's very effective, and even removing one of the middle layers resulted in a loss of about 2%. So that's still adopted today. We have networks of over 30 and 40 and 50 hidden layers, and they used a lot of data. They found a lot of way to automate data augmentation, and also that's details I don't think we have the time to go through. Just one anecdote. This picture, this is taken as is from the paper. This illustration, and when I looked at it the first time, I said it's corrupted. You know, something is missing here in the top of the picture. So eventually, this is the way it is in the original paper, and they simply couldn't fit into 8 pages, which was the constraint of the paper. So they cut the picture, which is quite strange, but that's the way it is. Okay, so I think
Udi, I'll ask you to kind of pick up pace a little bit because we have too many speakers.
Yes, I'll go quickly. So the main strength is making it happen. They worked very hard. They collected a lot of things that there wasn't one thing that contributed the 10%. They collected many tricks that contributed 1%. It's a combination of good engineering and research, which is a topic for itself. And that's, I think, a key observation. Many of the things, I won't detail it because we're short in time, but many of the details did not stick around. I think that they spend a lot of, a big part of their paper to describe, but for different reasons. Also, part of it is the strengths of the GPUs today and the other accelerators. Just one thing, this CNN, which was the main method applied, was very popular and still is since then. But recently, it is getting more and more replaced with a new technology or a new approach, which is called the transformers, originally used for NLP, neural language processing, but also found to be very useful for image or computer vision recently. And I just, out of curiosity, asked ChatGPT, back to Ilya, who is the chief scientist of this work, will it replace convolutions? So actually, the thing can put a paper together for you. That's something for itself, but at least what you get out that it is unlikely that transformers will completely replace CNNs as image recognition. So this is something to see in the future. Okay, the last thing, 1 minute on reproducibility in AI research. So this is a very interesting reading or article which covers this topic and explain, actually they analyzed 400 papers in the leading AI journals to figure out whether there are reproducibility. And you would expect AI to be very reproducible because most of them share the algorithm and share the code. So bottom line, sharing data and software code is essential, but does not guarantee reproducibility, because in many cases, if you change the data and use different data, it will not work. If you use the algorithm, but not the code provided, it might not work. It's very hard to tell, where someone multiplied by 2 or something like that. And there are different levels of criteria of reproducibility. So that's something I would recommend looking into. And actually, one interesting thing, just to close this presentation, there is an attempt to replicate the AlexNet as part of such efforts to replicate AlexNet, actually take the paper and reproduce it today. So they didn't succeed to do it, but they claim it's probably because the hardware today is not the same as they used. However, they did manage to reproduce the methodology and replicate the algorithm. So it is reproducible in that manner. So that's what I have to share with you for today.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
So obviously this is a big part of our lives nowadays. Everybody is giving voice commands to their cell phones and face recognition to get in and many different things. It's impacting our lives in a big way, but it's still quite amazing for me that if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. It's not really reproducible. So it's doing more or less the work most of the time, but not always.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to say anything, just turn on your mic and go ahead. Udi, your background is computer science?
Computer engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have lots of physicists here. What do you think?
You know, there is a cliche that there is no science without engineering and no engineering without science.
Yeah.
So you need the engineers to work, and we need your innovation and you know, to figure out new transistors and new circuits, and that's the way things work.
Anybody wants to comment? All right, if not, let's move to the next presentation. So, Jonathan, go ahead and share your screen.
Hi, everybody. Just a second.
We cannot hear you well. Can you speak louder?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I just had to put my mic next to my mouth. Just a second. So, let's see. So, is that visible to everybody?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, my name is Jonathan Shoshan, and I'm also from the Faculty of Engineering. I actually work pretty close with Udi for the past, I guess, it's been already 4 years or something. And also a chip design engineer. I'm doing my PhD for forever now in the field of controllers for quantum computers. So I have to put like a big disclaimer. While I'm doing circuits related to quantum computers, I'm not a physicist, and my knowledge is somewhat loose of quantum mechanics and the deep knowledge of quantum computers, so please be permissive. So my talk is gonna be on a fundamental talk or paper by Richard Feynman that was called Simulating Physics with Computers. It's one of the first papers that you would read if you're interested in the field in any way. It was given as a keynote speech in a conference that was named The Physics of Computation. That was held at MIT in 1981, and then it was also published in a journal the following year. So kind of a bit of history. So these are some notable attendance of the conference, and you could see it's very high profile. So either past or future Nobelists, and when like during the research I've had to do to give these presentations, I saw that much of the work in quantum computing, quantum information theory and whatnot is a collaboration between groups in that of people in that picture. The one taking the picture is an engineer from IBM called Charlie Bennett, which is one of the core researchers in the field, and so on. So we can imagine that this is an impressive arena to give the talk that we're gonna talk about now. So the basic outline for the talk. I will try to discuss, and soon you'll see why, the idea of a keynote speech and whether or not it could be related to as a scientific paper or scientific work. Naturally, we'll discuss a bit about the historical background and prior work before or leading up to this speech. Then we'll really briefly look at quantum computing fundamentals and mainly the way that those were illustrated by Richard Feynman in his talk. And then a really quick look at the timeline of how the research field progressed over the years after the paper. And that would also lead us to a discussion on the impact of the impact as an idea and the impact of the ideas presented in this paper, and then I'll conclude with the discussion. All right, so a little bit about Richard Feynman. I'm guessing that everybody's heard the name, surely the physicist in the crowd, in the audience, but like very colorful character, obviously a genius, and he's got his BSc at MIT 39, and then 3 years later, his PhD. Got the Nobel Prize basically on the work that he did in his PhD. He spent some time in the Manhattan Project, which supposedly also, like others that spent time in Los Alamos, ended his life with cancer. So that was kind of tragic, I think. And then most of his career was spent at Caltech as a professor there. He's very, very well known for his lectures. So he was a gifted lecturer, was able to explain scientific ideas and narratives in a very well understood manner. And so I came across, he was one of the commissioners in the Rogers Committee that investigated the Challenger disaster. I don't know if anyone remembers, but apparently it was caused by malfunctioning O-rings. And there was a big issue there with some sort of a cover-up, and Feynman was sitting there in the where they live broadcast the discussion, and then he brings this O-ring and he presses it with some kind with the I can't remember the word in English.
Vice.
What's that?
Melchatayim is vice.
Yeah, and then he puts this inside ice cold water for some time, and when he takes this out, he shows everybody and the whole American public how it would not retain the original form because it doesn't work well in cold temperatures. So now everybody kind of gets a very vivid understanding of what the actual problem is. So it kind of showcases the nature of how he thinks and how he acts and his pursue for truth on the one hand, but then in a way, a little bit of a vigilante, not necessarily following protocol. And then it brings us forward to the subject of this talk. And then finally, he introduced, and this is in some question mark, for example, the idea of nanotechnology. He gave a talk in 1959, was called There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom, where he challenged people to make miniature things. He offered a reward if anyone would be able to manufacture a tiny motor, and or otherwise, and the second reward, if anybody could write the contents of the page of a book in a scale of 1 to the 25,000 or something. And the reason I put a question mark here is that at the same time that Feynman was presenting the idea, other people wrote scientific papers that formalized these ideas, and even done it before he was giving his talk. So it's a question if he was the one introducing the idea, or if he was a famous person that was or his way of introducing the idea was more influential. If you remember, I was referring to the idea of a keynote. So the first sentence Feynman writes in his speech is on the program. It says, "This is a keynote speech, and I don't know what a keynote speech is." So it's in a nutshell, like the whole concept, right? So he doesn't know what a keynote speech is. So he just does what he feels like is the best thing to do under the circumstances. So as I said, we want to ask ourselves, can a keynote speech be a scientific paper? Does it need to comply with standards of scientific publications? And what about acknowledging the work of others? And we'll see that Feynman doesn't always consider that very carefully. So throughout the publication, there are no citations of anyone. So to give some historical context, if we look at background ideas, so Rolf Landauer was discussing erasure of information in the sense of where energy is spent, and then a very major contribution was given by Steve Weisner. In 1970, he actually apparently was the first one to bring up the notion of quantum information. But he didn't make a lot of effort to publicize that. And then Bennett, Friedkin, Toffoli, which is very well known, were discussing throughout the 1970s about application of reversible operations, which are in essence very basic in quantum computing. And then Paul Benioff introduced a hybrid Turing machine that was storing qubits, so in description, of course. Finally, in 1991, Feynman's speech was discussing the idea of a universal quantum simulator. And so referring to Udi's final slide regarding the very well discussed ChatGPT from the last 2 weeks or so, So if you ask, and if you want, I can show you later, if you ask the chat who invented quantum computing, then the answer would be Richard Feynman. If that's actually the case, I think it's arguable. So what actually Feynman was suggesting in his talk? So first he was asking, what kind of computer are we going to use to simulate physics? So that was the question that was very interesting for him. And specifically, he was referring to quantum physics. So he shows how if we wanted to simulate classical physics, there's no problem doing that with the classical computer theory and classical computer machines. But then he poses a fundamental constraint, which is the size of the computer has to be proportional to the space-time volume of the physical system. And then he goes on to show that you cannot do that with a classical computer, that if you were to try that, you would end up with an exponential growth. So if you increased the space-time volume of the system that you're trying to simulate, then you need to exponentially increase the number of elements that computation elements that you require in order to simulate that. So that would be a violation of what he was defining now as a quantum computer. So then he suggests, let's refer to space-time as discrete. And he gives some justification to that. So you can see on your right, this is from the paper, so a lattice, and every point here is a point in the space-time space. All right, and then another kind of maybe not completely intuitive idea is that if we define a function that determines the state for each point in space-time, that would be dependent on some points in the area of our point. But if you look closely, then you figure out some of these points are in the future. And then Feynman concludes and said, okay, this is the way quantum mechanics are. So this makes sense and also gives you better intuition why, if you wanted to run this simulation, you needed to harness quantum mechanics to do that. And then goes on in the way of an elimination to show how you cannot do that with classical physics-based devices. You could not do that with probabilistic computers and whatnot. He makes an observation of if you try to do that, then you end up needing to simulate negative probabilities, and you don't know how to do that, and so on. So that's a nice read. And then finally, the important observation is that with a suitable class of quantum machines, you could imitate any quantum system. So that's his statement. And then so he doesn't give a thorough specification of what a quantum computer is going to be. He provides this fundamental element, which is a qubit that is a system with two base states. And then this is not new. He doesn't claim it's new, but he discusses the operator matrices. So how you're going to manipulate the states of your qubit. And these are in this case, these are the Pauli sigma matrices. And then this is a quote, another quote from the paper. And then it says that suppose that we try the following guess, that every finite quantum mechanical system can be described exactly, imitated exactly, by supposing that we have another system such that at each point in space-time, this system has only two possible base states. So basically what the first bulletin says, and then either that point is occupied, that's one state, or unoccupied, and then you have the two states. And then, at least according to him, the mathematics of the quantum mechanical operators with that point would be very simple. So if we want to see what happened after Feynman's talk, then we see that there were several papers already showing as soon as the year after that, and he was already being cited there. But in 1985, David Deutsch presented a specification, a formal specification of a quantum computing system. And then he made further elaborations of that during the 80s. And then in 1990s, the quantum complexity theory came, and then another milestone in 1992, which is called the Deutsch algorithm. And then he demonstrated a very non-practical algorithm, but the big thing about it was that if you ran it on a quantum computer, it would be exponentially faster than a classical computer. And then the big, and then the big bang was when Peter Shor introduced his factorization algorithm in 94. And this was this excited the imagination of everyone, because if you can factorize large numbers, you can break public key encryption, and everybody would not want someone to have that capability and them not having that. So I think everybody these days understands why. Amazingly, 98, we already see a first functional 2-qubit computer, and then there was extensive work after. There is probably to this day a consensus that we would not be able to fabricate a quantum computing devices with a good enough fidelity to be functional without having to use error correction codes. And there's been much work roughly between 95 and 2010, and this is to some extent a complete work that defines what we can do to add redundant qubits and then be able to correct errors. And supposedly, if we had enough of these qubits, we should be able to run practical algorithms while correcting errors due to environmental noise, to imperfections in the fabrication, and so on and so forth. And then you could see major companies such as IBM was I think the front runner, but since then Google, Microsoft, Intel have long jumped the wagon with many others building and trying to scale quantum computers. So if we try to assess the impact of the speech and paper by Feynman, then we see, for example, in terms of citations, Web of Science registered more than 3,000 citations. Scholar even considers more than 10,000. These are appearing ever since 1983 and as late as papers that are going to be published in January. And also what you see in general is that it would appear probably in almost or every quantum computing related article, and it would usually be one of the first references because it would usually be referred to in the introduction. And then this I found in an article about the conference that was held. And then this is by Charlie Bennett, and he says, Feynman electrified the gathering by calling for the creation of a quantum computer. And he made a provocative observation. So if you really wanted to build a computer to simulate physics, that should probably be a quantum computer. And as I said before, the amazing thing is that this audience was comprised of like hardcore, the best scientists in the related fields, and some of them were already working on ideas related to this concept, but somehow he was able to, without too many complicated equations or for example, like Udi discussed, very long and hard work, but initiate or be considered as the initiator of a vast field of research, and people have been working on it ever since, and winning prizes and getting grants and funding and whatnot. And obviously, it's very exciting. So to conclude, as I said, many people perceive this talk as the place where the idea was conceived. And then I think it is reflected in the number and the nature of the citations. But I have to relate to the fact that there was significant work. Some of the hard work was already done before this speech, and it is very probable to assume that Feynman knew it. And again, after the talk, there were many years where people have done the following significant and very hard work to formalize it and to keep researching that. But maybe the fact that these concepts were presented mostly in an intuitive fashion, and that he was raising some serious formal questions that he was not giving the answers to, but that he was guessing that the answers are there and they should promote or support the ideas, inspired people to do the work. I think there is a question that needs to be asked here about crediting other researchers and referring to prior work, which, as I said, is all but ignored in the talk and the following publication. But again, I think there is no doubt about how inspirational the talk was, and in general, the the way that Feynman was Feynman's approach to science and to ideas, and how to explain things to other people, whether that would be the American public or his fellow very esteemed and scholar scientists. So with that, I conclude
Great, thank you.
my talk.
All right, I don't want to directly refer to quantum computing. I just wanted to relate two things. If you can unshare your screen.
Sure, yeah.
So two books that I think everybody should have. This is a mirror image. So this is, surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. This is really about his character. It's
a great book.
It's an amazing book, and everybody should have also. I have a fancy edition of the 3 books series for his lectures, and I really strongly recommend. This is basically just the notes he took in Caltech when he taught physics to undergrads. It comes in 3 volumes. So any comments about Jonathan's talk? All right, since the first 2 talks took more time than intended, let's move to the third one quickly. And this is Akshay, so go ahead and share your screen. Did I pronounce your name correctly? We cannot hear you. No.
Hello.
Okay, now it's good.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Yeah, it's Akshay. Well, it was right. Okay, it's fine. The way you pronounce it. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can, and go ahead.
Okay, okay, good. So, hello everyone. I'll tell about an ethical misconduct, which was from today's both of the talks.
Can you somehow speak louder, closer to the mic?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. Now I see that you have 28 slides. That's quite a bit.
No, it's not a very long slides.
Yeah.
I'll try to
go ahead.
come up with Okay. So previous 2 other talks were not related to this thing. So I'll talk about something which is serious misconduct, and we'll learn about some photoshopping things here, which is quite an interesting way people do the Photoshop and use it. So let's know. So my overview of talk will be like, I'll tell about what is the introduction of what the authors were trying to do. Then we'll talk about what were the research work and how, what kind of the results they got. And after that, we'll come up with the main point when how to someone on paper expose their diagrams and some articles what they wrote, and then we'll see the conclusion. We'll move ahead with the references and others. So here is there are the 2 very basic questions here that one can ask. I'll tell about these things beforehand because the work that I have taken is related to these things. So what is aging? Aging is, I think, it's a very simple stuff. Everyone knows that the getting older, it's if I can say in terms of a cell. So it's the property of a cell means time when the cell cannot divide itself. So one more thing that I forgot to tell, I'm not an life science person. So if there is anything that I say wrong, or if you think that there is something problem with what I'm saying, then you can correct me at that time. Okay. So with the aging, which is a very fundamental problem of the human being at this moment, because with the aging, since aging is not actually a problem, the problem is the all kinds of diseases and other things that come up with the aging. So like people get Alzheimer's and the cardiovascular diseases and disease like So many other kind of diseases that comes with the aging, and what people are trying to do is to somehow come up with some kind of a idea so that they can somehow prevent aging or at least reduce the means the span of the aging. And the second question I would discuss here is what is obesity. So I think there's this figure which represent that. Since it is an older figure, but still we can see that in 2014, majority of world, at least entire North America and the other population were having seriously high value of BMI. So people are getting obese, and the reason for that is because of very high fructose diets. So this is also creating problems. So there are research going on which is trying to somehow come up with some good results so that this can be prevented. So these are two authors who did this work. One is the Professor Komal Sodhi. He's a professor in Department of Surgery at Marshall University, and this is the Professor Joseph Sapiro, very renowned guy in his field. He has done lots of works, got lots of research grants and things. We'll see in the later part of the talk. So these two means what the project they did was somehow related with the study of obesity and study of aging, and come up with some good results. Okay, so before going to that, I'll try to tell what is this NAK ATPase and what it does. So this is an enzyme found in the animal cell. This is called sodium potassium adenosine thiphosphate, and it performs the several functions in the cells, such as the transfer of ions from such as sodium and the potassium. And here we can easily see that it helps in transfer of the ions, but there is a case that can I show a video here? Just a minute, 1 minute video.
Go ahead.
Okay, good. Okay, this video will explain very nicely what is the sodium potassium. Okay, so it's just a simple diffusion of ions. Okay, yeah, so it's just a simple diffusion of ions, but it has many other different kinds of works it does. So these authors try to use this enzyme and did the studies related with the obesity and with the aging. So now here are the 4 papers I'll show. I'll not go over the entire details of all the 4 papers. I'll just tell what we're trying to do with those papers and what the results in the later part. So here one of the paper is the adipocyte sodium potassium adenosine thiphosphate oxidant amplification loops. in the central regulator of Western diet-induced obesity. So what what they were trying to say that they said that we'll use the sodium potassium adenosine thiphosphate, and there is a mechanism what they call as a oxidation amplification loop. Thereby using that mechanism, what they were trying to come up with the conclusion that this enzyme somehow reduces the impact of the Western diet when they were given to some mice. So they fed mice with the high fructose and high fructose food material, so that they have got more fatty acids. Because of more fatty acid, the fat cells grew and they got obese. And with the help of the plasma taken out from these mice, they use the electrophoresis and some other different techniques to, and the result they came out with that this sodium potassium adipase enzyme can regulate the content of adipocyte into the cells, and this could give some give the results so that in medicine field some people can somehow make the medicines that will help people with the obesity and reduce the obesity. And okay. So this was the first paper, and here was these are like 4 back-to-back paper which came one after the others. So I think first was published in 2017 and comes the other one 2019, then 2020. So, and the other one was related to this enzyme related with the oxidant amplification, which regulates the aging. So here they try to claim, using the similar kind of data, that using this enzyme, they first fed with those high fructose diet to the mice. And then they used 3 different kinds of oxidating reagents, and 2 were one with N-acetylcysteine and one other oxidating reagent, and then try to compare with which kind of oxidant is properly regulating the aging process. So the result come out to be this enzyme is very helpful in amplifying, in regulating the aging. So this also gives them, with this paper, they came with a conclusion that if somehow we can use this enzyme, the proper bonding with some different chemical molecules, we can somehow come with a result, some medication that might help us prevent aging or at least reduce the aging. And this paper was also related to that obesity thing. Here also they tried with the same result, that they said that since the mostly aging occurs due to because of during the aging, people get different kinds of diseases. So their main motivation was to give the mice those kind of high fructose diet and let them and study them over a longer period of a time. How are the insulin level changes in those mice? How are their functions changing over the time? And with that, they came out with the results, which were quite nice. So if you have not noticed, then these 2 papers were published in Nature. This 3rd one was also in Nature, and the 4th one is in Science. Now we'll come up with the response. What was the response when they published? People were very, it was very fascinating results. So people were like crazy about this. And what they said that it can help with the future development of medicine, and they won various research grants. Now here are 2-3 cutouts I have posted from the Twitter and other places, which I found related to Professor Sapiro. And here was another cutout which says that it promised an easy therapy for a complex disease of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and may have earned 1 million in grants. And this was the response of Professor Sapiro. He said, I'm very excited about the research involved in this paper. I think our team not only reminds our colleagues, Dr. Zizian Z, if I'm not wrong, the discovery of NAKL's involvement in aging processes, also identified new therapeutic targets and specified drug strategy that actually slows down the aging process, although it will be some time before we can test these concepts in human subject. I'm cautiously optimistic about the eventual clinical treatment. So by this, he was trying to say that, okay, we have found some good results. We hopefully will try in the human subjects as well, but unfortunately, they could not do. So now it comes the actual part of the talk after this. So they also appeared in some news media. This is, I don't know, it was an Indian news media article. So here they have presented like now old people should stop worrying about the anti-aging because of about the aging, because there are some medication which will come very soon. There is a article in some Chinese media. Okay, so with their results, it was so good results so that they got very highly famed. Now we'll come up with the results. So here is one of the results, means one of the comment by one of the person in the PubPeer webpage. Now I think I will ask audience to tell me what is there in the image that everyone can see. Anyone can tell if you can see something, because I've already pointed out every stuff here.
It's all the same data, just playing with
Exactly. This is taken as this is the only first 3 strips were taken, and the other 3 was exactly copy pasted from the same stuff. So the people who noticed it first, they saw this, or they could not have noticed whether it is still a right result or wrong result, but they noticed this blue strain. And you can see the same blue strain in all the 3 strips. And the background in all of the strips are exactly the same, even though the chemical components are different. And some are treated with the different kinds of chemicals, some are not even treated. These are controlled reactions, some here they are using that enzyme, and here there are some more stuff also used in that gel to come up with the results. Now here is the second image from the same paper of, I would say, what can be seen here. Can anyone see what is the difference between these two? I don't know if I think it is very clearly visible, just a few of...
Well, it seems like they are heavily filtered.
This, no, actually, yeah, it's fine. But if you can see, if I'll stretch the below image in the horizontal direction a bit and crop this black part, I'll get exactly the same upper part. Mm-hmm. You can see the density of particles here and density of particle here. Just stretch the below image and crop this black part so that it should not be visible. You will get exactly like this one. And now coming with this one, I don't think it is very easy to visualize both what is difference between both. So now I'll show you what is the difference between two. Now tell me what is difference between two.
So that was 180 degrees rotation?
Just rotated, the figure rotated by 180 degrees. You can see each and every particle, every thing's looking exactly like the same stuff. So these were just 2 of the images taken from the first paper. Now I'll show the result from the second paper. Now you can see these 2 things here. This is the first, this was the result using some different protein or some other chemical reagent. Just switch over 180 degree, you will get this result. And now copy paste the same result here. And this was also noticed just because there was small strain in these 2. images that appeared, and exactly same strain appeared in here as well. And these are two different mice, and these are two different chemical analysis done on the different kinds of proteins. And so this was one of the result of that paper. Now we'll see the second result. Now you can see what's the difference between these two. Actually, there is no difference. Just increase the brightness and contrast of this image.
Actually, if I can make a suggestion. So I don't think we need to go through all the cases. You already proved to us that they manipulated data. Okay. So I guess they manipulated data in all the papers. So we can go
okay. So here is this two result, just 180-degree rotation. Here is the same thing, just 180-degree rotation in the same thing. And you can see here, this image is just a horizontally straight image of this thing. This is also just a simple 180-degree rotation of the above and below image. Exactly same stuff here. Here also the same rotation by 180-degree and got caught just because the background in both the images were exactly same. Now, so what was the conclusion of the things? That I did not have to say much of the things. So the total number of retraction they got were 3 in Nature, 1 in Science, and 3 other journals. Now more of the other papers are still under investigation. But one more thing to be noticed is that from 2017 till now, SODI has received more than $3 million of funding from NIH, and Sapiro has received around $15 million overall his career in the science. So, and there could be the question that what happened to them. So this is a very recent retractions. It occurs from 2020 till now. So up until now, I could not find any investigation done against them. So here he was one of the response from Joseph Sapiro.
So let me understand what you're saying. There were some concern raised, I guess, in some social media.
Yes.
Then the editors of these journals retracted those papers.
Yes.
But Marshall University did not open an investigation.
Against them yet, at least yet till now.
Okay, this is very unusual.
Until now, there is no such investigation against them. And they are both professors there and still working on some good projects and getting good fundings. So now here is some basic questions like we can ask why other people, because in those people, if you'll notice, there were more than 10 authors, but they were the lead authors of the paper. But why I would ask, why did not anyone else look at the results, or why did not anyone at least point it out so that they could have done more good Photoshop stuff before publishing. And the best question would be, why is not there any investigation against them? And since they got that huge amount of funding, what is the response of funding agency? Because all these questions, almost I would say, none of the questions have been yet answered. Only one thing that we can talk about is what needs to be prevented. So we are already discussing this thing from very first lecture, what needs to be. So it's a very difficult thing to prevent, but somehow they are not. So if I have time, I'll go over this small example, or should I not?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So there is one more example I will go over, which is a salivary gland carcinoma, which is it's simply a salivary gland cancer. It's a disease which occurs in mostly the tissues of salivary glands. It is not very common cancer, but it is a kind of a cancer because it is usually occurs in a salivary gland. Then there would be a swelling in the esophagus and stuff. So it will be very difficult in swallowing the food. And it has 5 different stages. You can see from here that the very first stage, and from here it's keep on growing, and now it can grow from salivary glands from here, and then it will start growing in the respiratory tract as well. So in the early stage, it can be treated very efficiently, I would say. That's what the data says, but in the very late stages, there is very high chance that person might not survive. So there are around 2,000 to 2,500 cases in US each year, and about 3 cases per 100,000 people in overall Western world. And the main reason for this would be the exposure to some ionizing radiations. So maybe if somebody has some problem like some tooth problem, they went for some X-ray or something, they got some high doses of some X-ray or some other different kinds of doses they might have experienced in their lives. So this could result into such kind of a cancer. Now the research I'm going to talk about is these 2 papers which appear in 2 different journals. One is in PLOS One, and this one I don't remember at the moment, actually. So what these means what the actual research here was, just to they took the data from some Hispanic and non-Hispanic people, and they use the data from actually some healthy individuals and individuals who had the cancers, and try to come up with the results like how are the genotype of a human being, and how are the geographical means how the geographical changes would impact the growth of these cancer, and how are these cancer going to affect depending upon from which geographical area the people are. So this was the very general description of the paper. Now comes the actual funny parts. So now you can read this thing. Cancer, these are just cut out from some images. Some newspapers. A cancer researcher was caught using her own blood sample for almost 100 samples. A cancer researcher said she collected blood from 98 people. It was all her own. So the result was, earlier I could not notice that what was the actual, what she actually did. So when I read earlier, I could not notice that she took the sample from 117 people. It's not like she didn't want to take sample, that's why she used her own blood sample. She took the blood sample from these people and somehow replaced those sample with her own blood sample. And it was caught when the people it was saying the same in the pub year, when the people found that the results was published, there were some 150 or 160 some results were almost identical. So when this some people commented on this thing, so there was investigation by the main author of this paper, who was Grant. And he told us, okay, we'll try to repeat the experiment and we'll come up with the results. And from there, they came out with that the data was somehow manipulated and could not repeat they could not get the results which they should have in the proper sense. So, and when she was contacted, the main thing I still have confusion about why does it happen? Is like she is not an author here in this papers. She was a kind of I would say, she was a research fellow appointed by university. It was by University of, it was I forgot the name of the university, but University of Arlington, something like that in US.
Let's just move on.
So what they, when it was, she was a actually research fellow there, but after this publication, it was published in something like 2015. She somehow Grant might have finished, so she left her jobs, or she was left out. But and then when these results, this kind of people told that, okay, there is something wrong with the data. Then she herself told that, okay, I used my own blood sample, but there was no investigation, I would say, because there was investigation, but there was NIH web pages which says that, okay, the data has been removed by some memes. So they did not declare why she did that, but this was her saying that, okay, I did. And then she was suspended for, I think, 5 or 6 years, so that if she cannot get any kind of grants, she cannot work in any of the research project for 6 years. And after that, she can work. So it is still debated topic whether why was she only done for
Let's try to finish.
Yeah, I think it is the end of the topic. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Akshay.
Okay.
All right. Just one comment to everybody for the next 2 meetings that we have. I did a really poor job today in watching time. I want everybody to make sure that you speak no longer than 20, maximum 25 minutes, leaving 5 minutes for discussion. We're going to have all the other sessions. I think we have 3 speakers each. If you'll have sessions where we have 4 people, that will really be very long. So we'll try to cut it even shorter. Thank you everybody for speaking today. Udi, Jonathan, and Akshay, and we'll meet next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.